All right, let's talk about NVIDIA. We are going to decode the story behind what might be the most explosive stock in history. Is this thing the engine of a brand new industrial revolution, or is it just the biggest, most spectacular bubble we have ever seen? See that number, 73%. That is NVIDIA's year-over-year revenue growth in a single quarter. For a company this massive, that isn't just growth. That's a shockwave going through the entire market. Okay, let's dive into this. So, yeah, a performance like that has everybody asking the exact same question. We're talking Wall Street pros, everyday investors, you name it. And to really break down the arguments, we're going to dig into the commentary and the hard data from two of the company's most recent and, frankly, most dramatic earnings reports. Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. We'll start with the mind-bending numbers, then we'll get into the bull case, why some people see an unstoppable AI revolution, and the bear case, which is basically classic bubble talk. And we'll finish up with the four key questions that are really going to define NVIDIA's future. First things first, let's just look at the raw numbers. It's one thing to meet what analysts expect. It's another thing entirely to beat it. But NVIDIA, they're not just beating expectations. They are absolutely shattering them, quarter after quarter, leaving Wall Street just scrambling to keep up. Take a look at this. Back in Q3, Wall Street was already forecasting a massive number, right? Almost $55 billion. Well, NVIDIA came in at $57 billion. That's not just a small beat, that's a huge signal that something fundamental is shifting. And then, what happens the very next quarter? They do it again. They come in over $2 billion above what everyone thought was possible. But you know what? The real shocker, the thing that really sent ripples through the market, was the guidance they gave for the next quarter. But here's the part that's truly wild. It's not just that the growth is high, it's that it's accelerating. Look at this. It goes from 56% to 62% and then up to 73%. For a company this big, that's kind of like a freight train that's not just moving fast, but is somehow picking up more and more speed. It almost defies physics. Now, to really understand this whole debate, we have got to get familiar with this one key term, peak cycle. This phrase is at the absolute core of the bull versus bear argument. The question is, are we seeing the absolute euphoric peak right before a massive crash? Or is this something completely new? So what do the bulls say? Well, they argue this isn't a cycle at all. They believe we're standing at the very beginning of a completely new industrial revolution, and AI is the engine powering the whole thing. NVIDIA's CEO, Jensen Huang, argues that the world is going through three enormous platform shifts all at once. First, a total overhaul of computing. Then, a transformation of existing industries using things like generative AI, which, can create brand new content like text and images. And finally, the birth of totally new industries. And his argument is that NVIDIA is right at the heart of all of it. And this quote right here, it really sums up the whole bull thesis perfectly. The idea is that for companies like Microsoft or Google, buying NVIDIA's chips isn't just a cost. It's a direct investment in their future revenue. Why? Because more computing power means better AI, and better AI means more profit. It's that simple. Okay, but for every bull out there, there's a bear who sees a very, very familiar and pretty dangerous pattern playing out. They're looking at all this explosive growth, and they see the classic signs of a bubble that is just getting ready to pop. The counterargument is actually incredibly simple. And it's rooted in decades of industry history. It doesn't matter how revolutionary the tech is, it doesn't matter how big the boom, for chip companies, the bust has always followed, every single time. So the bears are really zeroing in on four big issues. First, you've got this sky-high valuation that makes absolutely no sense if you think we're at the top of a cycle. Second, there's the historical track record of this industry, which always leads to oversupply. Third, you have this feeling of pure euphoria in the market, which is often a flashing red light. And finally, they're asking, is this demand even real, or is it just a panic-driven arms race? This whole debate, the bulls versus the bears, it really boils down to a few fundamental questions about where AI and technology are actually headed. And how these questions get answered, well, that's what's going to determine what happens next. So, question number one. What if a brilliant new algorithm, or just a way more efficient method for training AI models comes along? What if it dramatically reduces the need for all these powerful GPUs? A major software breakthrough could, in theory, pop the hardware bubble overnight. Question two, are the giant corporations, we're talking Walmart, Boeing, the big industrial players, Are they really going to start spending billions on what's called test-time compute? That's basically using AI constantly in real time to solve their biggest strategic problems. The bulls are betting it all on this, but that money, it has to actually show up. Third, let's be honest, we've been promised a future of self-driving cars and intelligent robots for years now. The question is, will they finally become massive mainstream industries? Because if they do, they are going to need billions and billions of new chips. And finally, what's plan B, right? If those huge high-end enterprise applications don't materialize, is a simple ad-supported consumer model, think chatbots, is that really big enough to justify this astronomical valuation? That is a huge, huge question. So where does that leave us? The numbers are historic, the technology is revolutionary, no doubt about it. But the fundamental question remains, is NVIDIA actually building the future, or are we all just buying front row tickets to the most expensive show on Earth right before the curtain falls?